Instructional coaching. The instructional coaching model is best used whenever the instructional leader has identified something in the teacher's portfolio, something in the teacher's toolbox that is either missing or that needs a little fine-tuning. So it's a way to add or fix strategies that teachers use on a daily basis. Now, instructional coaching is very appropriate for beginning teachers. It's also very appropriate for advanced or the most effective teachers. There's no such thing as a perfect lesson. One of the things we notice about excellent teachers is often, no matter how effective they are on a daily basis, they all want to get better. They all want to have tips for improvement. Instructional coaching is how an instructional leader can satisfy that need, how to pick just the right instructional tool that's a perfect complement to the set of talents that the teacher already brings to the table. Jeff King, thank you very much for being a part of our coaching demonstration today.
Thanks for having me.
And let me also say congratulations. I just understand that you were named your school's Teacher of the Year.
Well, thank you.
That is excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So often the Teacher of the Year is, shall we say, a lady. So yeah.
Especially in elementary school.
That's right, especially in elementary school. So that's great. Congratulations. That's a great honor. I also know that one of the interesting things about you, Jeff, is you've had some international teaching experience. You taught in Venezuela?
In Venezuela, correct.
Right. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was my first year teaching, and a friend and I, we just got out of teacher training, and we're like, let's go somewhere while we have a chance.
That's right.
We went to and taught in an international school in Caracas. So.
Yeah. Now, tell me what your classes were like there.
It was really nice being a first-year teacher because the class sizes were really small, had about 12 kids,
right.
And they were made up of children from all different countries. You had some Korean students, some Venezuelan students, some American, Canadian.
And you were teaching them English.
Teaching them in English, yes,
yeah.
But they had a lot of different background languages.
Yeah.
So.
That's neat. And you are K through 5 here at this school. You are an ESL teacher.
Yeah.
So you teach kids. Now, is mostly the language that they're speaking, is it mostly Spanish, or do you have some others?
In this area, most of it is Spanish, but occasionally we'll have some Asian languages.
Really?
And yeah, just to spice it up a little bit. So it's nice.
Well, good. The outline of what we're going to do today, this is called an instructional coaching session.
Okay.
And what that means, Jeff, is that instead of doing a coaching session where I come into your classroom and observe and give you some feedback, or instead of doing a session where we think together about a future lesson and kind of plan it, co-plan it, in this case, we're really going to forget both of those, and I'm just going to try to play the role as kind of a personal trainer.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a new exercise to put into your exercise routine, and if you'll diligently practice it, it'll make you even more fit than you are already. So kind of like a tool for your toolbox.
Okay.
And I don't want to just be a coach that talks about it. I'd also like to be a coach that actually comes in and helps you implement it. So the part of this session that's just you and I talking will be a few moments right now, but then I'll be back in your classroom and I'll give you some feedback on your first 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 tries at this new
I might
thing.
need a few.
Yeah. So that's what we'll do, if that's okay with you.
That sounds great.
Great. Very good. Let me ask you this then. In teaching, it's true that we remember things best in our first experience. I remember my first car. I remember my first girlfriend, And it's like that in the classroom too. And you're teaching some students that are perhaps from a different culture, perhaps they've just moved here, they're learning to speak English and they're learning their subjects in English, so it's very pertinent to them. Talk a little bit about why we remember things so well the first time we learn them.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, when I think back to my experiences in Venezuela, one of the reasons that I learned that first experience was I was nervous, and so my mind was focused in because I knew I probably needed to listen up and pay attention to what's going on, and also that you're receiving the correct information. That's very important because you might carry in misinformation to other areas of learning.
Right. Well, I know that I've learned many things incorrectly the first time, and then they stick with you for decades sometimes. And I've even been in some embarrassing arguments with people trying to convince them that I was right when I've been wrong all these years.
Yeah.
So it really is, there's this kind of first place in the brain that is really important, that, as you say, it's accurate, it's complete, and that's what I want to talk about today. It's a principle of learning called first-time learning. Sometimes it's called degree of original learning, but it's the same idea. when students are presented something that they think is new or novel or first time, it's kind of like their brain has this special memory fertilizer. And whatever you plant during first time learning grows good, quick, deep roots, kind of like Miracle-Gro. So there are several things to keep in mind when you think something's new for students. As you said before, making it accurate, it's a good idea. Making sure it's complete, having enough time to give it an initial good first treatment. Wouldn't want to introduce a new chapter or unit or concept at the end of the day or right before spring break. But the part that I'd like to talk about today is called connected to reality. If there's any way we can teach a new concept by connecting it to reality, it's always easier to remember that way. Okay. You know, I've forgotten many things, or remembered many things that I learned incorrectly the first time. But as far as connected to reality, here's a couple of examples, not from your classroom, but just from schools in general. I saw a second grade teacher once who was teaching a microscope unit. And instead of just teaching it from a worksheet, or instead of just talking about a microscope, she had a microscope on every table. And so the very first time those second graders ever encountered a microscope, there was a real microscope right there in front of them. They looked at the pond water, you know, they adjusted that thing. You remember the first time you ever did that? It's really a pretty cool moment in your life. You might remember it forever. She made sure that the first experience my second graders ever have with a microscope is going to be a good experience. It's going to be connected to reality. I was in High Point, North Carolina, not too long ago, and I was watching a teacher who was a woodworking teacher, and he was teaching a bunch of ninth graders. And there's a little bit of pressure to being the woodworking teacher in High Point, North Carolina, because that's the center of, you know, pretty good furniture making. They've offshored a lot of that lately, but there's still quite a few master craftsmen in that area that are great. Generation after generation have been in the furniture making business. So there's a little bit of pressure there. And it was interesting to me that when he first started his unit on woodworking with these ninth graders, many of which had never seen the side of a screwdriver or a hammer, you know, they weren't farm kids mostly, they were city kids. Here's what he did. He put them all on the activity bus and he drove them about 3 miles down the road to the lumber yard. And their first lesson in woodworking was to walk through the lumber yard and pick out, this is a 2x4. This is a 4x4. This is a 16-penny nail. This is a galvanized number 12 screw. This is a cross cut. This is a coarse, you know, outdoor plywood. You know, here's why plywood is called plywood. I remember he stood a piece up on the end and actually had them count the layers and said, those are called plies, you know, and some kids may have thought that plywood comes from a ply tree, you know, like pine comes from a pine tree. So he eliminated all those misconceptions by teaching it the first time by connecting it to reality. And when I asked him, I said, you know, gosh, to start off a unit with a field trip, that's a pretty novel idea. And he said, you know, when I do it this way, later on when I say go get a 2x4 or go do this or go do that, they know what I'm talking about. Their initial experience wasn't on a piece of paper. To boil it all down to its essence, what we don't want to do as teachers, if we can help it, is have a student's initial experience with anything be on a piece of paper or be from a textbook. We want it to be in some way connected to the real world, like the microscopes, like the lumber yard. All right, so let's forget microscopes and lumber yard. Let's go back to your classroom. Okay. So you've got groups of students that you're teaching in your ESL classes. What are some things coming up in the next day, 2 week that that might be new or novel that we could apply this connected to reality principle to? Okay.
Well, one most immediate thing is I've got some new students coming in, and they're actually coming into the country for the first time and don't know any English. And so I have to kind of give them the basics they're going to be able to need to make it in the regular classroom, like raise your hand, you know, have a seat now, and, you know, just some basic classroom commands that will help them to function in the regular classroom.
So instead of handing them a piece of paper that says, here are 5 classroom commands or rules, instead you're going to take each one of those and connect it to reality. Say, all right, ask a question. Raise your hand. This is how you, or here's a fire grill. Let's not talk about it. Let's have one. All right, there's the buzzer that's going to go off. Here's what it sounds like. Let's line up. Let's go outside. Just that little extra. Remember, not on paper, connect it to reality. So some new students. What else is coming up that will be first-time learning for some kids?
First-time learning for some of my more advanced kids, we're going to try something called conversational writing, where we've had plenty of conversations in class, but we want to try to make it into a writing activity. And hopefully, this will lead down the road. I know a lot of kids like to do texting and different kind of chatting and stuff. But this will be their first experience with conversational writing.
So conversational writing, does that mean like it doesn't have to be perfectly, it's sort of like how you talk?
Yeah.
It's a conversation.
It is.
So to connect that, like you said, to texting or to, how you would email someone, that is connected to how they use it in reality, rather than here's a worksheet, here's the definition of conversational writing, here's how it's different than letter writing. Yeah, it's connected to reality. Good idea. Now let's do this. Let me come back into your classroom on the day that you do the conversational writing. So look into your plans. Let me know when that will be. Say, Mike, it looks like it's going to be about 10 o'clock next Tuesday. I'll show up, and all I'll be doing is just watching for that one thing. I'll be saying, okay, I'm going to give Jeff some feedback on how did he do with connecting conversational writing to reality. And all I'll be looking for, your keys to success are, I'm not going to teach it to them just on a piece of paper. I'm going to connect conversational writing to reality for them, knowing that that'll be better first-time learning, and they're going to remember it better because we remember everything better that we learn first. Now, probably you'll get all that right. I'll say, hey, super, keep it up. But sometimes it takes a couple of repetitions. So I might say, okay, what's coming up next week? And I might coach you for several weeks down the road. Okay. But if I'm a good, tenacious coach, I'm going to stick with you until you say, I think I've got that in my toolbox now. And every time I come up to a new unit or a new idea or get a new student where it's going to be first time, I've got some way that I'm going to connect their first experience to reality, like the microscope, like the woodworking teacher, like the text messaging for conversational writing. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay, we'll do that. Give me a little feedback on the coaching session. Typically, when teachers and non-teachers sit down and talk, it's usually about evaluation, or it's about putting checks in the box and putting things in your personnel file. What I wanted to do was sort of, just like a coach, like a personal trainer, take a look at your repertoire and say, here's something that might be a good complement to the tools that you already have. Since you deal with so much first-time learning with your students, I thought this might be a concept that if you learned even better and even deeper, might turn out to be a sharp tool for you. So do you think that was a valuable process?
Definitely, yeah.
Good.
I really like how we were able to focus in on one thing, and I wasn't worried about all the other things that were going on in my teaching that you could possibly evaluate me on.
Right.
I knew you were looking.
Well, that's coming next. I've got no. I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, and to learn something, as a coach, you take them one step at a time. And Jeff, you've already got a phenomenal toolbox going, and if you'll maintain that good open attitude to no matter how effective I am, even if I'm teacher of the year, I've still got more to learn.
That's true.
And I can still get better and better. And by asking other people to come in and help fill up my toolbox, it'll be to the betterment of all of your kids too.
Sounds great.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you a lot.